Welcome to the REI Diamonds Show with Dan Breslin, your source for real estate investment jewels of wisdom.
Welcome to the REI Diamond Show, episode number 101 with Matt Theriault on transitioning down to 100 units. I'm Dan Breslin, host of the REI Diamond Show, and this show is going to be exciting because, like myself, Matt runs his investing business across more than 6 markets, utilizing a strong team. Matt grew his portfolio to several hundred units before switching gears and paring down to a more profitable and less distracting 100 or so units. Matt and I dive deep into some of those decisions together, which are the same decisions I've witnessed many experienced investors, including myself, make about our buying philosophy. We might as well jump right into it. Welcome to the show, Matt. How are you doing today?
Very well, Dan. Thanks for having me.
Cool. I am, as most of my listeners know, sitting here on Lake Michigan. Looks like what we Chicagoans would love to call the Middle Coast United States, since it looks like an ocean. But where are you recording and hailing from today, and what's weather like there, Matt?
I am in Glendale, California, and I think it's 72 degrees, clear sky.
Nice. Beautiful. So you're a fellow podcaster like myself, give a lot of value to your audience. But, in case my listeners don't know who you are already, do you want to kind of give the backstory and how you got started in real estate, maybe what your business looks like today, the Reader's Digest version?
Sure. I'm glad you said Reader's Digest version because it can go on forever. When I got out of the Marine Corps, I spent the next 15 years of my life in the music business. And when the digital download came along, just kind of turned that whole industry upside down and essentially put all of us small little record labels out of business and did it really quickly. So inside of 6 months, I was bankrupt, I was divorced, and I was 34 years old bagging groceries. I'd literally gone from a 7-figure year to $7 an hour. And after about 6 months of the biggest pity party that I've ever witnessed to date, blaming everybody and everything on my situation, finally came to the realization that nobody was coming to rescue me. So if I wanted to stop bagging groceries, I was going to have to do something else. And what I really missed was my lifestyle. I really missed the money from the music business. And so I was like, well, we have to learn something new. What can we go learn that pays a lot? And I was introduced to real estate of all people, or from all people, the grocery store manager. And I remember him saying, Matt, real estate, it's the final frontier where the average person has a legitimate shot at creating real wealth. And I was like, all right, then sign me up. If that's the final frontier, I was at such a low point. I was like, I felt far below of an average person. I was like, that sounds like that's going to be it for me. And so I spent the next 4 years being a real estate agent, and then kind of came to the realization, wow, the wealth is in real estate. I'm really seeing it being on the other side of the desk. So I made the transition from real estate agent to real estate investor, and was able to take the rich dad formula of escaping the rat race to get your passive income to exceed your expenses. I was able to conquer that in about 3.5 years, and then noticed a lot of people wanted to know how I did it. And so teaching became the next evolution of that. Started my own podcast, as you had mentioned, and here we are probably a decade later. And we show people how to invest. We do it with people, and we do it for people. So we've got those 3 levels of service, and we're still active investors ourselves.
Cool. I thank you for your service. The U.S. Marine Corps, that's big, as I'm sure listeners do too. I dabble in the music business, so there's never any 7-figure paydays per year, anything like that for me. I just enjoy writing the songs. And I have a couple artists that are quote unquote under the label, but it seems like more of a hobby these days than anything for me. I just figured I'd share that. That's something I usually don't ever have come up in topic in this area, but it's something I'm still passionate about. Do you still dabble in that at all? I imagine you got there through passion and into the music scene.
I really don't. Those last couple of years of the music business were so hectic. I mean, it starts as a passion. And when it turns into a business and your livelihood is dependent on it, that you have to start doing things differently because you have to sell, you have to make money. You've got a staff, you got bills, and And so, I got taken a little bit off course away from my passion, and the whole business aspect of it kind of put a bad taste in my mouth. I don't think I listened to music for like 3 or 4 years after the fact. I was just a sports radio guy.
Wow.
And, and I'd say just the last couple of years, I started listening to music again, and I'm cool with it. And I think about now what could have been and what if I stuck with it and da-da-da-da. But yeah, that's about the extent of what it looks like in my life now.
Cool. So you have, how many units was it? Did you mention 100 plus, something like that? Rental units, I assume?
We have it averaged out right now between 50 single families and 50 seller finance notes that we carry. We got up to a little over 300 about 2.5 years ago, and we've done a lot of consolidation and just optimizing the portfolio.
Sorry, so I have 300 units. I'm going to go somewhere with this. 300 units a few years ago,
sure.
50 single family left, 50 notes.
Mm-hmm.
I am going to venture to say, did some of the discipline from the military carry over into your, 300 units in the course of, 10, 12 years, takes some level of execution on that? Is that part of the pathway?
I don't know. I think it was, we'd had normal lead generation and marketing machines running, but when I got started, I wasn't aware of how you generate leads if I had money to spend. So I did a lot of, traditional networking and traditional relationship building for my business. And that resulted into a lot of just great opportunities that were just handed to me. I remember there's one investor that I had met through a RIA club, and he introduced me to a mutual friend, who's a mutual friend now. And, we had 35 properties for sale, and he gave me seller financing on all of them. So you get a few of those, your portfolio can grow in size pretty darn fast. And so that's how it got there. It wasn't like just grinding away, doing one deal at a time and 300 times. There were some packages in there that we were able to acquire in their entirety.
That's cool. I remember when I started in the business, I had to get a ride by my dad. I had no car. I was so broke. The bad credit was the story. No job really to speak of. I was doing, handyman things, painting a room here and there to kind of keep the lights on, if you will. And I was introduced around those networking events by some people who really opened the door for me. So I know what you're talking about, and that really opening the door. And then you mentioned the lead generation not being a skill, which I ended up stumbling upon myself, Matt. In the beginning, I put a newspaper ad. You remember the newspapers, right?
Yes, I do.
It was an effective medium for us in 2006. It was like a $300 or $200 a month ad, and I probably got 20 to 30 leads out there, and I was doing an average of 2 to 3 deals out of that newspaper ad for the next year and a half, 2 years, until the market started to change where we were. But even to this day, I'd say that that's probably one of my own critical skill sets in my business is lead generation. That's where I spend the most time on, figuring out, higher and better ways to do that. And that's definitely what I bring to the table for us. We currently do, anywhere from like 30 to 50 deals per month, in the 5 markets that we're located. So lead generation is our definitely our pipeline and our blood in our business. Let's talk about, you mentioned that lead generation. Is that something that's critical for you guys now? Like what is the bulk of your investing business? How has it transitioned, Matt? I guess I'm going in a few different directions, but from 300 units down to 50 single family with 50 notes, and maybe you could explain your thought process behind why you're making that transition and what drives it today. Sure.
I've never been a flipper. I've never been a wholesaler. From my perspective, wholesaling is what I do. And I've done a ton of wholesales, but it was never the primary focus. It was just, okay, this property isn't going to fit to hold in my portfolio, so let's dump it. So it was more along those lines. So I've always been a buy and hold guy. I really bought into the whole passive income philosophy, particularly coming out of the music business where, I was very much based on, I was only as good as my release that I had the previous month. So it was very much active income with my music business. And I just remember what that felt like when people stopped buying CDs and they stopped their normal behaviors of how they consume music. I had nothing because I couldn't sell a new CD in the same way I had sold it in the previous decade. So I took that kind of pain and that reference point with me into real estate. And when I read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, it was the first time I was really introduced to the concept of passive income. I mean, I could figure it out. I speak English. I know what passive is. I know what income is, but never really had someone like say, this is what you need to do. And this is like the keys to the kingdom type thing. And, so I just started buying anything that would cash flow, anything that I could manage and control. And it got to the point where, you know, we got a sizable, portfolio. And I really kind of discovered that, you know, the real estate is the easy part. And I would say real estate is also the safe part, where all the risk comes into the equation is the people that you work with. And if I look back and look at all of the money that I've lost in real estate, it was all directly or indirectly related to a bad contractor or a bad property manager. So about 2.5 years ago, we did a 80-20 analysis on our whole portfolio and just kind of put what's the 20% that's producing 80% of the comfort for us. Let's hold on to that, keep that. And then let's take this other 80% and see if we can just start liquidating in a way that we can either pay down debt or turn it into a stream of income somewhere else with less headache. So we sold a lot, and we sold a lot even at a loss just to get out of it. That's how painful some of the management issues were getting. And so we were able to sell at a loss, put some cash in the bank, and then we started selling our properties via seller financing to our tenants. So they might have been paying us $700-800 a month in rent, and we're like, well, how would you like to own this thing for $500 a month in rent? And that's a pretty good proposition. And as long as they could come up with a small down payment, we turned all of our tenants into buyers. And I don't know, after about a year, about 18 months of that whole process, you know, life has probably never been easier and better. Like, aha, this is it. This is the passive income that they're talking about, right? But I had to go way on the other side of the spectrum to learn that tough lesson, and then just kind of backed my way out of it, and very strategically.
So this is cool. This is exactly the answer I was looking for. The small down payment to mitigate, I guess, the risk and make that tenant at least have some bar to jump over, I assume, hopefully correctly. Can you give us an idea of what the down payment is and maybe anything I might have missed in my assumption there?
Well, each one was a unique situation in the sense that we would reverse engineer, like, how can we sell this property to the tenant, make a huge profit, but then also give the tenant a payment that's lower than what they've got right now in rent. So there's a lot of reverse engineering, but typically it was a property, the most one were between $50,000 and $70,000. And if we could get 10%, 10 to 20% is what we were always looking for. It usually came out around 10%, and then we would do a second for an additional 10% over like a 2-year note. So we would have the main note, and then we'd have a 2-year note for that additional 10%. So we'd get 20% down, and we got some of those properties for so cheap. I mean, that was almost all of our money out of a lot of those. So that's how we did it. But we really reverse engineered each property on an individual basis and just came up with price and terms that, you know, had a win-win situation for both sides.
Do you buy properties right there where you live? Can you give us an idea of kind of like the market conditions of where these rentals are, if they're spread everywhere or focused and concentrated in one specific area?
Sure. I imagine that the price point had you wondering.
It does.
We're in Los Angeles, so there's nothing around here that costs $50,000 except the car. And so it's all everything that we have is in the Midwest or the South. I call the coast or the land of money, and Middle America or the land of cheap property. And if you can make those two things meet, boy, the sky's the limit. You can accelerate your progress really, really quickly. But yeah, everything's in the Midwest and the South.
Interesting. I am wondering, did you buy these? Are you still buying anything right now? Has your buying philosophy changed, and what are you acquiring these days, Matt?
Yeah, so my philosophy has changed a little bit. It used to be all about what the ROI was on the paper, you know, and, you know, these cheap houses, lower income neighborhoods. And if I had to start all over again, I'd probably do it very similarly, because you can get control of a lot of assets. And once you've got a control of a lot of assets, it's much easier to manage the debt and the return on those once you have control of them. And that's kind of why I took that path. But now I'm getting to the point where I'm going for a little nicer neighborhoods and sacrificing the ROI a bit, because I've found that, you know, you go to a lower income neighborhood with a 14% cash on cash return. that might in the real world perform at the end of the year at 2 or 3% just because of everything that comes with it, the baggage wise. But going to a nice neighborhood and picking up a property at 8%, that's kind of, most of the time for us, that pretty much performs right at the 8% because we just kind of picked a little nicer area, a little nicer neighborhood. And so that's, then, that takes years and years to like look at your numbers and figure that out on an average. And so that's how our philosophy's changed a little bit, but we're still 100% buy and hold. I'm all about passive income. We just started doing land actually and looking at lots and selling those back via seller financing and creating additional passive income for ourselves that way too. So those are the two things that I'd say the upgrade in houses is probably about 18 months old. And I would say the land is about 6 months old for us.
Who do you use to manage the mortgage payments? Is there an outside servicing party that you would mention on this episode?
Yes. I usually have to type in the domain name 3 or 4 times before I figure it out because it's such a generic name. I think it's sellerloans.com. Sellerloans.com. And they've done a really good job for us. We've used them from the very beginning. I think they charge us 1% of what they collect. And they'll do up to 3 collection calls before they even involve us. So it's made it, they're well worth their 1%.
I'm in the process of turning a few of the properties I had that were difficult to sell over, very similar to what you're doing here. I noticed, Matt, it's a common theme amongst people who've been in the business as long as you and I have been, 10 years or so plus, that we start to require the nicer areas. And our philosophy does kind of develop over time, and we're looking for that real lower maintenance, lower headache. Maybe it is a lower return, but we've discovered that over the years, it actually turns out to be a better return, and maybe the rents improve and the values of the property improve faster than, on the low end where the ROI is higher. Can you describe maybe a recent deal of how you acquired it? Did you put 20% down? Was it a private lender situation, seller financing? Maybe just kind of give an example of a recent deal in more of this nicer area, lower ROI that you'd mentioned.
Sure. So here I am when I filed bankruptcy in 2001, 2002, after I got out of the music business. And so I did not have conventional financing as a tool to me for a very, very long time. My credit score just recovered about a year ago. So we've been going very traditional. We've been buying properties just through other turnkey operators. Like we've gotten to the point where, hey, we'll pay the premium. We know what it took to get the property. We know what it took to fix it all up. We know the headaches you're going through. I don't really want to go through that, so I'd be happy to pay you your price for it as long as the property cash flows. So our last several acquisitions have been very, very boring and vanilla to where we've gone to the banks. We put a traditional down payment down, and we've leveraged some of our peers and all of their assets and resources and efforts to just continue to build our portfolio.
Gotcha. Yeah, I like the development of it and the willingness to pay what appears like a premium in the beginning. But what other option would you have, Matt? Are you going to fly out to like Tennessee and, establish a team on the ground there? I mean, it's not realistic for most investors who are spread all over the country, especially in LA where the values are never going to make sense at any price point whatsoever to hold and build a rental portfolio there.
Mm-hmm. Yes, there's just something that came out in the news too that it looks like they're going to push for statewide rent control in California. I just saw the headline this morning.
Oh my gosh.
And I was just like, oh my God, landlords, you might want to consider selling your properties now while you can, because when that rent control comes in, it's going to be a little tougher sell.
Yeah, that's kind of nuts. How does that work? Are they not allowed to evict the tenant at that point? The tenants that are there are grandfathered in?
Yeah, I mean, like where I'm at right now, I don't know about the whole state. And I imagine it's probably very similar in San Diego. It's probably very similar in San Francisco. And then here in Los Angeles, rents have risen so quickly that, we're getting to a point where you might be able to cash flow in California because, it's about the same price to rent as it is to purchase. So I see California in their, the ways that they operate, only that they understand, are, kind of putting a halt on that. And so people don't get priced out of the state because, they would rather have you pay their state tax than you pay a high rent. So imagine that's some of the motivation.
I know you're a systems guy, Matt, so I'm going to shift gears here a little bit, and I'm going to maybe ask a leading in question. What would be your highest value skill set today?
Highest value skill set is negotiating contracts, talking to sellers, talking to buyers. Like if I'm on the phone, that's where I'm making the highest dollar per hour, I guess. Yeah, that's it.
Nice. Now, are you taking you're actually jumping in still and hopping on the phone with the sellers and hopping on the phone with buyers when you're selling and buying these properties today?
Yeah, I do. I've jumped back in now that we've taken on this whole land strategy. So no one around here really knows how to do that. So I've been doing it myself and figuring it out, and it's not too different. But yeah, I'm talking directly to everybody.
What systems have you created in the last 12 months, 18 months, 24 months that you would say have maybe provided the most freedom for you or saved the most time for your team or even provided the most impact to the bottom line revenue recently?
Sure. Two things come to mind. We went and we white labeled a CRM software that was just like, we had a couple different CRMs before, and they were just such a headache and so many moving parts. Things broke all the time. We stumbled across this one. I was like, oh, let's use this. And then looked at it. Cause it's all underneath one umbrella. The whole thing works just underneath one umbrella, one roof. And it's just been a dream for us as far as our follow-up systems go. And we can follow up with text and voice and email. And it's just the whole follow-up system, keeping our pipeline warm and nurtured and, putting us in front of them as soon as they're ready to change their mind and sell. That's been one thing that's done wonders for us when we made that switch. The other thing that was actually a surprise, but it's just been fantastic, is we use a project management system called Trello. And we just created a process where there's checklists for everything. So every time we buy a property, we have a checklist to run down. And like our acquisitions person will have 5 steps. They'll do that. Then it'll go over the transaction coordinator. They'll have 5 steps. And it just it's created a very seamless flow and nothing falls through the cracks. When we get a property under contract and we'll decide we're not going to hold it. So we put it in our marketing channel inside of Trello, and then it just goes down. It gets put on the property gets secured. It gets cleaned up. It gets inspected. It gets put on all the online classified ads. It gets the Facebook post. It gets this and that. And it just goes down right this thing, and it just works like clockwork. And we can get every single property on the market probably within a 24-hour period, and it just changes hands. It's almost like I don't know, what do you call that? Not a conveyor belt. What do you call it? Like an assembly line.
Assembly line, yeah.
Yep, those are the two things that really made a difference.
You brought up another question for me, and that was, where are you still acquiring, marketing, talking to sellers? Is this also spread out across several states and several areas, or is it focused in one area?
No, we're spread out. Over the years, we've got 10 really strong relationships in 10 different markets. So that's where we've done a lot of acquisition, and we do a lot of our selling through there. But we are actively marketing in Orlando, in Colorado, Riverside, California, actually. And we just picked up Tennessee again. So we're still actively marketing in 4 states.
Were you previously marketing in 10 states?
Yeah, we got up to like 12, 13 states. We went way too wide. I would never do that again, but we tried it.
Yeah, I know the feeling. Was it the people on the ground there where things got spread out, you couldn't train, you couldn't manage, 10, 12 markets, all of a sudden the time for the return on investment of that time started to drop? Is that what took place there, or was it something different that made you step back to 4 markets?
No, 100% what you just said. And this is like my new saying. I've been saying it a lot in the last year, that real estate is safe. It's the people that are risky. That managing that many people became a chore.
I know the feeling. I'm not going to share my own experience, but I do want to know, Matt, how do you I don't want to bore everybody. Probably my audience probably heard it. You probably lived it. There's no need to re-spout that out. But how do you choose your partners, or how did you, or what characteristics did the 4 partners in those markets you are in exhibit that were exemplary and made you say, hey, I still want to be in business, or I want to do business and be in business with this person?
It's a big indicator when someone brings you a deal that they could have easily slipped under your nose and you would have never known it. Like there's no way I could have ever discovered it. And those 4 people, like they did that routinely and regularly. Like they will go buy a property from somebody and they'll get a referral to the next door neighbor, which I would have never been able to track being on the opposite side of the country. And, you know, who knows? Maybe I'm only getting 1 out of 3 of those referrals, but it's still more than I would have gotten, you know. And I just think that speaks volumes of the character, especially when this type of business can be feast or famine, and when people are hungry and it's been a while since they've had a bite to eat, you know, that causes people to do things that they might not otherwise do. And, you know, I'm close to my people. I know the situations that they're in, and they're just still very sharing and team oriented and more long-term oriented than they are transaction oriented. So that's probably the biggest thing and the biggest reason I'm working with them. And it's the biggest reason I'm not working with the others. But, you know, when you first start working with somebody, everybody is on their best behavior for that job interview, quote unquote. And they'll tell you exactly what you want to hear, but you don't really know until you get into practice. So sometimes to build a good team, you have to work with a lot of bad team members to weed out the good ones, or to weed in the good ones.
Do you have a process for due diligence? Doesn't have to be for these business partners. Maybe it's for other people on the team that you could share, maybe step by step, couple questions, something on the front end to give you a gut feeling on somebody before you actually have gotten into a deal?
The due diligence on the people or on the property?
On the people at this point is what we're talking about.
Got it. In our markets, we've gone through like almost, I think, every property manager in every market. But where we've really gotten the wins, where we, you know, stopped making the same mistake over and over again, was when first I think we just Googled a document, something, questions to ask property managers. So we knew that after all of our experience, like, it doesn't matter what we ask, they're going to tell us what we want to hear anyway. Let's go ahead and set this up to be a different type of test. And what we did was, if we had 10 questions, we'll ask them 7 during the interview. And then we'll call them back 3 separate times, leaving a new question on the voicemail just to test their response and how they get back to us and how the time frame that they get back to us. And so that's been just kind of a little random thing we came up with, and that's worked pretty good. The second thing that we do is we start them off really slow, and we micromanage the hell out of them on the very first deal, just to kind of let them know who's in charge and who's watching, and make sure that they can actually follow through and they don't get all pissy, they don't get all offended, like they are actually there for the greater good. So those are the 2 things that come to mind of how we're finding our good people. But initially, you just kind of have to guess and use your gut instinct.
Yeah, property managers, we could do a whole nother topic on that one. But how many do you have currently on the team now?
So we've got 5, we're in 5 markets, maybe 6, 5. And then the other part that we've been able to do that helped us out, and I probably should have said this for your previous question, was we make sure that we have 2 of everything in every market. And we make sure that they know about each other. And what that does is it incites a little bit of internal competition. And we've noticed that when we started doing that, it's not a perfect system still, but we have noticed that expenses have dropped a little bit and performance has risen. So I would say out of those 5 markets, I think we've got 11 different teams of property managers, contractors, and realtors.
All right. Like the sound of that. I'm going to switch gears a little bit here, and I'm going to ask, do you have anyone that you would look up to in the business you might identify as kind of a mentor, or who you would consider to be like the most successful real estate investor or developer, and why you would choose that person that you might, you know, look up to early on? You can know them publicly, personally, dead or alive, but the important thing I'd like to get at is why you believe they are successful.
You know, I don't know if I'm at a point right now that, I mean, I know there's people out there, countless people out there that are significantly more successful than I am. But I don't know if I know anybody that has something that I'd rather have than what I have myself, if that makes sense. I do have mentors. I do have a business coach. But when it comes to the world of real estate investing, I don't. I wish I had a better answer for you on that, but I don't.
I think it's actually a pretty good answer. I personally don't have somebody I can point to myself. I ask everybody that comes on the show the same question there, and I would probably point to, the entire crowd of people who've been on my show, because from every episode, I don't know if you experience this too, Matt, but I get so much value from the guests that come on and share, their best thoughts with us here on the show. Right. And it's been like my ongoing mentoring program, just like I have several pages of notes from our conversation already. It's really been a blessing for me to be able to do this and kind of have my podcast show be the most successful real estate investors that I have the opportunity to come across. And I really appreciate you coming on the show too.
You bet. Collectively, what do you think has been the biggest benefit of being able to talk to so many real estate investors?
I think it's just been incremental changes in my own philosophy and mindset. So just like you talked about the 8% ROI and the nicer neighborhoods and things of that nature, I remember when, that took place over the course of we did a couple land deals right on the heels of some developers who came on my show. It was just a few little nuggets that came on. So I'm able to take, a small seed and then quickly, because I'm in 5 markets the same way that you guys are in 4, and I've failed out of a couple of them also. But I just love the opportunity to have this like constant flow of knowledge seeds that I can take a few of them and then quickly test them out, try them out in my own businesses. So it's been better than reading, book after book. I mean, definitely equally as powerful as reading book after book after book has been the opportunity. Like you and I are busy, Matt, and we shut the door and we made sure we had a quiet space here. And then you and I had this conversation today and we recorded it and we make it available to our audiences. I mean, it's just, you can't beat that. You can't get access to people who are as busy as we are for 25 minutes, 35, 50 minutes at a time and just kind of ask questions and have an intelligent conversation. So really it's just that uninterrupted time with such high performance has been probably the answer that I would say collectively talking with the crowd would be.
Yep.
How about you? Do you have an answer for that same question?
Yeah, and I'd never thought of that question before, but I was kind of formulated as you were talking. I think what I've really discovered, a big epiphany, and it's because I've got one on my feet inside of the education space and teaching others how to do the same. And, I feel like I have to really stay engaged and stay up to date and maintain being a practitioner. So I'm relevant in making sure that the information that I pass along is what's relevant for today. And, with talking to so many other successful real estate investors on my show, and the questions I kind of ask are kind of dual purpose. One, I want to know for myself, but 2, I also want my audience to know, and it hasn't failed me yet. And that is that the shiny objects is just a bunch of BS. There is no secret. There's no magic. It is just like any other business, and anyone that claims they have the new way of doing things, it's just maybe a slight variation of the old way of doing things. It's a people business. You have to talk to people. You have to build relationships, and you have to do good business, and you have to be right with people, and your job is to buy low and sell high. And it's all the cliches that real estate is. That is what the business is. And I think I've just kind of come to the epiphany that, it is what it is. I know how to do the business, right? And there's no magic pills, no silver bullets out there. It's just work like it is in any other industry.
It's funny that you say that, Matt. I feel like I've discovered along the way, I've had the epiphanies myself. I started in a business in 2006. It's 2018 now, so that's 12 years. The last 4 years have been where people would point and say, oh, yeah, this guy's got it figured out. But before that, we're talking about 5, 6 years where I was looking for those silver bullets, and I was making deals, and I was having success, and was making a pretty good income along the way as well. But I feel like when I look back, even to this day, I have these epiphanies, and it feels great. I'm sure there's like a dopamine rush that takes place as my mind's making these little connections. And I feel like it is a silver bullet, and I'm like, wow, I'm going to do so many deals from, this list, or I'm going to do so many deals from whatever the case is, some source of deals. I'm on somebody's webinar, I get somebody's strategy, whatever it is. I mean, we're all in the space, so I'm sure we all can relate to that. But it's been a compilation of those epiphanies, of those, silver bullet moments I feel like I've had. I remember feeling like, oh my God, I don't need to know another thing now that I've got this taken care of, like, sending out letters to find sellers. But it's been like a collection of those and like a continued hunger to find that next little piece for me that has definitely built the momentum that we've certainly enjoyed at Diamond Equity Investments in the last 4 or 5 years of, substantial growth.
Yeah, I mean, certainly technology is introduced different ways of getting introduced to people. But at the end of the day, you just have to talk to people and, see how you can exchange some equity for giving them some peace of mind. And that's how you buy discounted real estate. And at the end of the day, I just don't think that's ever going away. And, they might have a clever way of running a Facebook ad or a clever way of sending out a ringless voicemail. Technology allows you to get introduced to people in various ways. But at the end of the day, it's you buy and sell, and you buy low, you sell high. And it's all done through people. And so that's the part I'm kind of referring to. And you just have to talk to a lot of people, regardless of how you get to meet them or introduced to them. You have to talk to a lot of people to do a lot of deals.
You are right about that. Matt, I'm going to ask you this question for book recommendations, but I want you to answer it 2 ways for me. One or 2 books that you'd recommend to somebody just getting started in the real estate business. And then the second way would be somebody who's been around the business 5, 10, 15 years, and 1 or 2 books maybe that you'd recommend, knowing that the person's already been successful in the business.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good question. So if you're just getting started, I think that there's kind of 2 companion books, and this could really go with whatever industry. It works really well with real estate, but I can imagine it would work with, tomato gardening just as well. And that is the book, The Slight Edge, and the book, his name is Jeff Olson, and then there's a book called The Dip by Seth Godin. I think just getting started, those are 2 key books to read, because you're going to get an idea of what you're in for as you're starting something new. And then you're also going to get a lot of clarity around what consistent and persistent work looks like and what the benefit is of that work on the other side. So those would be the 2 for the beginner. And then a book I just read, I think it's rather older. I obviously have it staring at it right now. I don't know when it was actually published, but I just read it. I had a long drive from my mom's house back to home over the Christmas break. So I was in the car for like 12 hours. And I listened to this book the whole way. And it's called Profit First by Mike Michalowicz. And the reason I just thought of that one right now, well, one, it was staring me in the face, but second, I think it was I've been in the business for a long, long time, and I just constantly keep putting my money back into the business, and I've taken very little off the table for myself. And this book, it shows you how to take money off the table for yourself without it interfering with your day-to-day operations and your business still growing. So that was one of the most exciting books I read in a long, long time.
I can't wait to check it out.
It was good. I had him on my podcast, and he was just as pleasurable in person and talking to him as he was in his book.
So, Matt, if you could go back to when you were 34 years old, just getting into the business, and you could share the crown jewel of wisdom with yourself, knowing what you know now, what would that be?
I would say anytime you are involved in, listen here, young Matt, anytime you are involved in a transaction that involves money, ask yourself the question before you complete the transaction, how can I turn this into residual money? How can I turn this into a residual income? I think that's the biggest thing. Every single day we're here in our office, and we have a turnkey operation. So, we're in a spot where, like, do we flip this house for $30,000 or do we hold on to it for $300 a month? And, instinctively, almost everybody takes the $30,000. Like, they think that, like, it's more money, you're doing better, you're progressing further, you're more successful. But when you extrapolate that out over 5 years, and if you always took the 30 grand and never took the cash flow, or if you took the cash flow and never took the 30 grand, like taking those two different roads, you'd be in a far better position if you had taken just that $300 a month of passive income. You know, I know this, I teach it, I understand it, I just explained it to you, but because of the human being inside of me, I still struggle with that decision on a daily basis, you know? And I would just pound that into my 34-year-old self's head.
Nice. So, Matt, how can people get some more information about you? Would you like to share URL, some contact information, maybe a link to your podcast?
Sure. We are at epicrealestateinvesting.com. That link will take you right to our podcast in iTunes, epicrealestateinvesting.com. And something that we just started, Dan, that we just launched actually last Monday, is a new pilot program around building new case studies. We've had a remarkable breakthrough in the last 18 months on just generating really successful case studies, and we want to do some more. And we're showing people how to literally do this that have very limited resources, very much in the way that I started out. Sounds like very much in the way that you started out as well. And it's totally free. It's actually better than free. We're actually paying people to complete it, because if they do complete it, they're going to make us look really good, and we're willing to compensate them for that. So that's at freerealestateinvestingcourse.com, freerealestateinvestingcourse.com. So between those two, that's a great way to get in touch with me.
Nice. Matt, I had a really good time doing this episode with you today. I really appreciate you shutting the door, blocking out the distractions, and being forthcoming with all of your information, knowledge, experience, and wisdom here. So I appreciate you and appreciate you coming on the show.
Hey, thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me. I appreciate being here.
And thank you for listening to this episode of the REI Diamond Show. Today, I am going to ask for a small favor from you. I am making a push on YouTube to bump my ranking, and I need to raise my subscriber count. So if you don't mind, I would appreciate if you would go to YouTube and subscribe to my channel at the REI Diamond Show. If you are interested in other notifications for new episodes, you can either sign up at reidiamonds.com or subscribe through one of the podcasting apps, including iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. If you do decide to sign up at reidiamonds.com, I will send you a PDF of my 164-page book, Become a Wholesale Real Estate Master. Do you have investment capital not already earning above average returns? If you're interested in checking out my upcoming private mortgage investment opportunities I have available in Chicago, Atlanta, Florida, and Philadelphia, go to superchargedreturns.com. You'll also receive instant access to the audio on how to create tax-free real estate investments. And you can also check out profitable real estate deals at that site. Finally, if you have certain questions or topics you'd like discussed on a future episode, or if you have a guest suggestion, someone you'd like me to invite on the show, you can contact me directly by clicking the Contact Dan link at reidiamonds.com. I do personally monitor that link as well. Thanks again for being a loyal listener of the show. Dan Breslin here. I'll catch you next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the REI Diamonds Show with Dan Breslin. To receive email notifications of new weekly episodes, sign up at www.reidiamonds.com.